Hey there and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug Season 4 review. And today we'll be talking about the latest episode to drop, Dearest Family, which follows Gabriel's attempt to break through the enchantments on the protection charms created by Ladybug. Whilst Tikki has a once-in-a-millennia sugar-induced breakdown, and Marinette's family goes insane trying to figure out what the best way to raise her is. So off the bat, it seemed like this was going to be a pretty big episode from a story progression point of view, with a lot of big moments. And yeah, I guess there was a little bit of that. But for an episode that got as much hype as this one did anyone else find it a little bit underwhelming? I'm not saying it's bad by any means. I mean, it was actually pretty funny, but I just didn't feel like it really delivered on the expectations that had been set up. It just felt like it could have been so much more and done things differently to produce a more satisfying episode. Anyway, we start off the episode with old mate Gabe in his evil villain lair / butterfly breeding room as he Skype calls with Natalie and tries to break the magical charms that Ladybug's been creating to prevent people being akumatized. So, a couple things about this scene. First up, thank God an episode starts with a scene that is not set in Marinette's bedroom. Variety is the spice of life, so it's nice to actually switch things up once in a while. Especially nice to just jump straight into the story and have Gabriel doing something beyond just akumatizing someone when they get upset. Second of all, has Natalie gone to the doctor? How is she still sick? I get that the Miraculous was broken and damaged her, but surely she could get treatment. It's not like she's terminal, is she? Is she going to be stuck in her pajamas for the rest of her life? Stuck in her room, even after Gabe gets his wife back? That would be a pretty awkward conversation, I think. Oh, and then Gabe also busts through the power of the charms by creating a Mega Akuma. And that sounds pretty intriguing. But how does he make it? Well, get this, right? He concentrates really hard. Honestly, I was hoping that the answer would be a bit more inspiring than, oh, he really wanted to destroy the charm, so now he can. It doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, Ladybug being able to create these things in the first place at the drop of a hat was a bit of an ass pull. But now this? It feels like they could have spent an extra 5 minutes in the writing room and churned out something better than this explanation. And on top of this, if any Miraculous holder can push the boundaries of what their abilities can do, why do they need those special potions to fly or breathe underwater or whatever? If there are no boundaries, then there are no boundaries. I get that it has to be within their power sphere, but the rules seem so grainy and molded to fit the situation that it kind of hurts my soul. Anyway, the scene moves on to the bakery where Tom, his dad, and Sabine are working together to make a King's Day galette, with half of Paris waiting outside their bakery to sample the delicious treat. And man, I've never really thought about it, but their bakery must be pretty famous. Set up in the middle of Paris, with all the big names in the show going there for their baked goods, such as the mayor and even old Gabe. If this was real life, this would be one of those stores that everyone says, oh my god, you have to visit this place when you go to Paris, and would have lines wrapped around the block just to get to purchase a very overpriced loaf of bread. Before you have to pretend that you can taste the difference between this bread and the $1 loaf of home brand white bread that you got at the supermarket, so you don't seem uncultured in front of your friends. But moving on from my very specific example, we see Tikki suddenly and quite out of nowhere begin her transition from cute little magical being that's quite responsible and kind to deranged sugar junkie who desperately needs her next fix. We see her drag Marinette downstairs in order to secure a slice of galette, but when that doesn't work, we see her beg her to hook her up with some of that sweet pastry using her best attempt at puppy dog eyes. This then leads to Marinette manipulating her parents into giving her some as a sample plate for the people outside, before she sneaks some to Tikki to share with the Kwamis. And of course, Tikki eats it all herself. Classic addict and classic addict enabler. She then gets back to the Kwamis, and they freak out that Tikki ate the galette herself. Not because they were disappointed, but because Marinette has inadvertently awakened Tikki's cosmic hunger. Unfortunately, this in turn awakens Tikki's hidden addict rage, and she frightens them all into submission, whilst Marinette brushes off their concerns and tells them she's going to get more galette for everyone, and that it would be fine, because after all, she knows Tikki better than anybody. Even though the Kwamis have known each other for thousands of years, but yeah, sure, you know Tikki better than they do. Kid, you've had this thing for like a year and a bit. Don't get too big for your boots. Once again, classic addict manipulator, classic addict enabler. And this was actually pretty good writing. It felt very realistic, even if it's about something stupid like sugar addiction. Also, Sass then sends out Waze and Bark to keep an eye on things, so is he like the leader of the Kwamis? Is that his role? Or is he just the wisest one there? You'd think that if he was the leader, or the smartest one, Marinette would try listening to him once in a while. Oh well. Anyway, they make their way downstairs where Grandad's beating back the mayor with a baguette in order to save the last galette for his family before his ex-wife turns up on the back of a motorcycle thinking that it's Marinette's birthday and that an appropriate gift to give a 14-year-old kid is a motorbike. Yeah, good one, Gran. And I thought the Grandad was out of touch. Yikes! Also, how the hell did that thin woman and that tiny little man produce the mountain of beef that is Tom? It just, biologically, it makes no sense. Imagine giving birth to a baby of that magnitude when you're as thin as her. To be that big as an adult. How big was he as a kid? God damn. Anyway, after Marinette notices Tikki trying to steal the galette and foils her plans, the family takes their discussion inside, where they argue about what's best for Marinette. And honestly, I agree with Gramps and Tom. Marinette is a young teen. She does not need to be riding a motorcycle in the middle of the city alone. Grandma needs to take a seat. And Mum as well. What the hell do you mean that Marinette knows best for herself? BS, I've been a teen. I didn't know shit. And I think most ex-teens would agree with me that for the most part, I wish I hadn't done half the stupid things that I thought were a good idea at the time. Same principle applies here in my opinion. And also, I find it a bit strange that they seemingly think Tom's too protective. And really, the parents that barely see their kid, who's always supposedly in her room or out babysitting with friends or doing loads of different projects, to the point that she has the spare time to moonlight as a superhero, is considered a helicopter dad? If he was truly overprotective, he'd keep a closer eye on his kid. Anyway, we move on back upstairs where Marinette's panicking, realizing that Tikki's going insane trying to steal the family's baked goods. Sass hits her with the old, "I told you so," before Marinette transforms in a last-ditch effort to control her binge. And unfortunately, this turns Marinette into the superhero equivalent of Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And meanwhile, Marinette's family finds himself falling victim to a Mega Akuma, which turns them all into their classic Akumatized forms and sends them off trying to find Marinette so they can force her into choosing their way of thinking. Anyway, Ladybug escapes before they arrive and then finds herself on the roof, having stolen the mayor's galette. And man, this episode's really going all in on the drug metaphors, with the mayor buying the galettes from some shady dude in an alleyway. Anyway, Ladybug reverts to her Gollum form and starts chowing down even as Bakerix tries to fight her and steal her Miraculous, only to be saved by the timely intervention of Cat Noir, who cops a 3-on-1 beatdown and has to escape into the sewers, whilst Marinette detransforms and witnesses Tikki go full junkie while she gets kidnapped by Nana and can't power up because that would reveal who she is. Also, I have to take a moment to appreciate the random scene of Gabe giving the villains a pep talk, only to suddenly start eating a truly massive slice of galette. It's probably one of the most random things to happen this episode, and for some reason I actually had to pause the episode to laugh. It was just absurd. Why is he eating it then? In costume, whilst he's doing supervillain work? How did he get it? Did Gorilla go buy it? Did he slip it through the door and have it on a plate on the floor whilst Gabe was monologuing? Would the butterflies not be attracted to the sweet, tasty fruit? So many questions that I need answered. Anyway, putting that aside, we then get to see the remaining villains catch up with Grandma, and then they all start having an angry discussion, which allows Marinette to escape extremely easily. Like, they just don't even notice. Villain fail for sure. How could they not notice? Weren't they on the roof? And then she sneaks down to the street, and they just let this happen. Gabe should just call back the Akuma at this point. Anyway, Marinette makes it down to the street and finds Tikki, who's gone full psycho and stolen all the galettes she can find, before she uses a lucky charm without a user and creates a galette the size of half the planet. Jesus. Anyway, Cat Noir powers up and goes into space, and yeah, it turns out the pastry is in fact far, far bigger than the Earth itself. I wonder if it tasted any good though. Oh well, he destroys it. And in a kind of anticlimactic fashion, considering how this was a big selling point in the trailers. Not that it wasn't cool or whatever, but it was just over so quickly. Also, an explosion that big of something that big would definitely have an effect on the planet, right? Like, when he uses Cataclysm, there's always that black dust, and sometimes there's still fragments, yeah? Would that not get sucked into the atmosphere? I mean, there's a lot of it. Like some weird pastry smog, maybe? You know, like when a volcano erupts and there are those ash storms that hit cities? It'd be like that, except pastry crumbs, sugar, and pieces of stewed fruit flying through the air. Tikki then tries to make another one straight away, and I like how she's thinking, to be honest. Only for Marinette to talk her down and realize Sass was right. She doesn't know her as well as she thinks she does. And I kind of felt that Tikki behaving so strangely was pretty random and rushed in my opinion, but they did a pretty okay job of explaining it here, with the excuse that she was nervous to tell Marinette about her sugar weakness. They then agree to work through it together, which is cute. And maybe this is reading too much into it, but this could be a hint for how things are going to turn out later in the season, where Ladybug's more vulnerable and not perceived as the perfect hero anymore, like Tikki was considered the perfect Kwame. Anyway, it's only at this point, that the villains somehow realize that Marinette's gone and set out after her, only to be confronted by the dynamic duo. Long story short, the villains get clapped, and the Lucky Charm tells Marinette exactly where to go to find the Akuma. And then they save the day, and the pair have a cute little moment posing as king and queen. Although, did anyone else find the animation for when she throws up the crown weird? Usually I think that's set outside, so the item fades into the sky. But this time it kind of got absorbed into the ceiling. It just kind of looked off. Anyway, everything gets fixed, the family reconciles, and for some reason, Marinette gets a scooter, even though it's not her birthday. Sure, why not? And then in a post-credit scene, Gabe goes full Thanos and plots to rewrite reality. Nice. That's actually really dark, but I like it, and it fills in a lot of plot holes for how he'd randomly explain his dead wife coming back to life. And that brings us to the end of the episode. And honestly, I was a little let down by parts of the story itself, or lack of much progression considering the hype it had. But I do think that the fact that this episode was actually enjoyable sort of balances that out and makes sure that it's still worth a watch. That being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.